Hey everyone, this is Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology, and today I will be joined by my friend and colleague Alex Amorosi to talk about your horoscopes for the month of May. We're going to be looking at two major transits this month, the lunar eclipse in Scorpio and the entrance of Jupiter into Taurus. So that Scorpio-Taurus axis we will be looking at for all 12 signs of the zodiac. Based on your rising sign, we recommend that you listen for your rising sign because that's going to correlate with the whole sign house version of your birth chart and give you the most accurate placement of those transits in your actual birth chart. So long as you're orienting through the whole sign house system, it's going to be close enough for Placidus users as well that I would recommend listening to your rising sign. But anyway, you could listen to it for your sun as well if you wanted to. That is our agenda for today. As always, before we get into it, don't forget to like and subscribe. Tell us some of your stories and comments in the comments section. You can find a transcript of today's talk on the website, as always, nightlightastrology.com. If you go over to the website right now, you guys know that we are enrolling students for the upcoming program, Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic. Scroll down on the courses page and you will see it. It starts on June 11th. You can hear you can read what it's all about on the website. If you have any questions about the program whatsoever, you can email us info@nightlightastrology.com. It is an incredibly well-organized program with tons of support. We have a tutoring staff that's there to answer questions in a discussion forum. We've got breakout study sessions with tutors. We have bonus material and reading material and quizzes and all different kinds of ways to reinforce and integrate what you're learning in class, whether your intention is to practice for other people. We have plenty of people who go on to practice professionally after the program. And we also have a fair amount of people who come through just because they want to deepen their personal love and connection to astrology, which is great because astrology is just like any other tool you can put in your kit to help you through all the different seasons of life. It's like having a prayer meditation practice or a yoga practice. Your ability to learn the language of astrology is really like having an additional way of understanding the different things that you're going through day in and day out. So if you love and listen to astrology, but you're like, I wish I understood a little bit more than I do, check out the course. I think you'll really like it. At the bottom of the page, you'll find the early bird payment, a payment plan, and you'll also find need-based tuition assistance. Apply early for need-based tuition. We do have a limited number of those available. Those are meant for people who can't afford to take the program, but could use a little bit of help to make it happen. For whatever reason, you're on a tight budget, you're a single parent, you're on disability, you're retired on a fixed budget. You're part-time employed only, or just lost your job, you're between jobs, whatever the case may be. If we can help you make studying astrology happen within the parameters of your budget, that's something the need-based tuition is designed for. It's a unique part of our business model, and we try to make sure that nobody's ever priced out of studying astrology. So if you, again, any questions, email us info@nightlightastrology.com. Sign up early for the need-based tuition. Those are limited. All right. Well, on that note, I'm very excited to get into your horoscopes for the month and welcome back my friend and colleague, Alex. Hey, Alex.
Oh, hey, Adam.
Good to see you. Welcome back.
Good to see you.
If you guys don't know Alex, you can find him on Instagram. It's Alex Amorosi Healing. And you can find him on his website if you want to book a reading with him or do any kind of personal one-on-one work with him. It's alexamorosi.com. Alex, this month we have two major transits we're going to be looking at. One is on May 5th, the lunar eclipse in the sign of Scorpio. And the other one is 11 days later on May 16th, Jupiter is entering the sign of Taurus. So that Scorpio-Taurus axis is going to be bright and loud in our charts this month. I wanted to start and just pop up the chart and ask you for your impressions of the Scorpio lunar eclipse on May 5th. Just before we talk about them for any signs, what are some things that come to your mind with the lunar eclipse in Scorpio that could be applicable for everyone?
It's interesting with this is, by the astrology, a very complex eclipse. There's a lot going on. There's, you have the moon opposite the sun and Uranus. You have Mars as the ruler of the eclipse in Cancer, and the moon in mutual reception with Mars. And then you also at the same time have Venus passing a square to Neptune. And so all of that, on the surface, the technical name for it, I guess, is just an astrological clusterfuck in a lot of ways. But so I think that was Dorotheus who said it. Maybe it's Manilius.
Yeah.
But if we distilled it down, this is a very emotional, internal yin eclipse, and I think all the houses, we can see impact in our external lives for sure, and I'm sure we'll see that. But my impression has been of this eclipse, because there's so much water involved in it, water and earth, the yin signs. It's a very internal process, and that's what I've been noticing, with myself and with friends and with clients lately. That externally, yes, there are a lot of things that are shifting around and may feel challenging, but it's the inner process and the inner emotional world that has really felt shaken up since the Aries eclipse, which is leading up to this May 5th eclipse.
Nice. Yeah,
Yeah.
the things that stand out to me, and I've said this before a few times in some other videos that I've made, but it's just that when you have Mars in Cancer in its fall, the Moon in Scorpio in its fall, and the two are configured to one another by a trine, that it's like two drunk people helping each other home from the bar. That image, right? There is some kind of deep dredging of the emotional depths, getting down to the roots and scraping out the grime from the bottom of the well, so you can drink clean water again or something like that. It's like there's some kind of emotional breakthrough. The two planets are helping each other, but they are getting into some heavier territory. I think ultimately that there is healing happening in this. Lots of water, lots of emotion, lots of ancestral or past kind of stuff. This is a South Node eclipse.
Yeah.
It's not easy stuff, but there is a promise of like resolution and some kind of soothing effect that will come afterward. I don't think it's a surprise that, as you were saying, with the context of the eclipse, just a few days later, the sun hits a conjunction to Uranus, and there's a feeling of like catharsis and breakthrough that happens shortly after the eclipse. You get things like the Venus-Neptune square in the midst of it, and I also wonder, the like. There could be two paths. Venus and Gemini square Neptune could be like the flirtatious path, but maybe like the avoidant path. We're flirting with something that's deep and sort of murky. Do we actually get into it, or do we try to avoid it? But at the same time, I just think there's too much gravity in the water signs and heavy water signatures that like something we may try to avoid will sort of come up and say, no, you're going to have to really look at this.
Yeah, totally. I totally agree. And I think one thing I often talk about with clients with strong water signatures in their chart, it's water signatures, water signs tend to like to have sort of a secret internal space, like a secret garden of their emotional space, or a secret garden in their mind. And that can be a place where you can feel really trapped in your emotional world. But when you can go into it, sometimes when you're doing energy work, you go into what's called the power place. You go into sort of a very deep internal place where you're sort of excavating something from the psyche or from the energy of somebody, where it needs to be brought into not even necessarily conscious awareness, but just out of the secrecy, out of that sort of place where it feels like it has to be contained and kept in this place. Like, actually, it's okay if that's seen. It's okay if that's out in the public sphere of my own, maybe not with other people, but at least in my own consciousness. And I feel like that's something being liberated here with the Mars Moon dynamic, particularly.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I like that Jupiter is entering Taurus again, not 11 days after the eclipse. It feels to me like that's a little like we're starting to move out of Marsy territory. The Mars is about to leave Cancer and move into Leo, a little brighter, happier place for Mars. Jupiter's getting out of a Mars-ruled sign and another fire sign. And it feels to me like after the eclipse, you get this gradual feeling of breakthrough, soothing of tensions, healing of old wounds, and then this kind of sweet, stabilizing presence of Jupiter entering an Earth sign. What else comes to mind for you, Alex, about Jupiter entering Taurus?
Well, following along what we were just saying about the eclipse, I do think that that's a fairly intense emotional excavation. But very quickly after that, Venus will move into Cancer. Then we get Jupiter, which I think she gets co-present with Mars, which I actually really like seeing that, and she's superior to Mars. So there's like that cooling, calming effect of Venus coming in. Then we see Jupiter coming in to Taurus. Now, I see this, especially on the 20th when Mars moves into Leo. Adam, like at the end of Return of the Jedi, where the Death Star is blowing up and Lando comes out of, the Millennium Falcon comes out of the Death Star, like in the flames behind it going, yee, ha, ha, like that. I feel like there's some sort of massive, like, cathartic moment where it's this moment between the 16th and the 20th where there's been all of this really deep, intense emotional wrangling of letting go and things coming to the surface, and then sort of an extroverted or an external release of like, oh, we're through that. And as Jupiter moves deeper into Taurus and out of the square with Pluto, there's a settling that starts to happen. There's a stabilizing. There's a feeling of one coming into a Venus ruled sign where there's a sense of feeling almost stabilized by the very practical things of life, like being embodied, or movement, or being in nature, and all the Taurus type of ideas that I think begins with initially what feels like a really pretty powerful release, but then quickly starts to soothe and calm from there.
Yeah. Yeah, I like Jupiter into Taurus also because it's now co-present with Uranus. And that's the sneaky part about this, is that like once Jupiter gets co-present with Uranus, that yeehaw is such a good image. The Millennium Falcon flying out of the exploding Death Star. The Jupiter Uranus is very much, it's always been long associated. In fact, right now we have scheduled Becca Tarnas to come and give a talk during our summer speaker series on
awesome.
Jupiter Uranus contacts. But Jupiter Uranus has long been associated with big leaps and strides in space, space travel, astronomy, physics, science, where there's a sort of okay, we just found this new God particle, or whatever, like the sense of discovery, expansion, moving beyond previous limits, moving into previously uncharted territory with a sense of like limitlessness and possibility. Now, some of that comes down to Earth. It's not all, it can overpromise and like undersell, but I love Jupiter entering Taurus just because it's a much more stable place, but it's also meeting up with Uranus, which is going to be, really, turning the volume up on originality, experimentation, revolution, and Jupiter getting in there with it is going to amp all of that up, which I think for most people will probably be a pretty positive thing. Jupiter Uranus contacts are, for example, often associated with like avoiding the worst case scenario because of some angel that swoops down and helps you turn your car just before you get the fender bender or whatever. So I think it's a very benefic place for Jupiter to be entering.
Yeah, I agree. And I have a friend with Jupiter Uranus trine in their chart, and one of the most innovative people with like a wellspring of innovative ideas. Like it just keeps pouring out of him. And it's I think with Taurus too, Adam, I could see a lot of like environmental sciences, breakthroughs in environmental sciences, or like things that are supportive of the environment in some way or something like that coming out too. But I was reading a really interesting article about different technologies that are coming up to sort of break down plastics in the ocean or collect stuff like that. And I think that will become even more emphasized over the next year while Jupiter's co-present with Uranus.
Oh, that's super cool. Yeah. I love that. Yeah, it's especially very ecological in an Earth sign like Taurus like that. That's really neat. Let us now turn our attention to our horoscopes. And after talking a little bit about these two transits, lunar eclipse in Scorpio, Jupiter entering Taurus, again, that's the dates for these because I can't put them up simultaneously. May 5th for the lunar eclipse in Scorpio, May 16th for Jupiter entering Taurus. We're going to be looking at the axis of houses and the different events happening in them through these two transits this month for each sign. So I'm going to start with Aries, and then Alex will add his thoughts, and then he'll start with Taurus, and I'll add mine, and we'll go like that around the wheel. So we start with Aries rising, and you're looking at the lunar eclipse being in your 8th house. Well, Jupiter entering Taurus comes into your 2nd. For the lunar eclipse in Scorpio in the 8th, I like to think of the end or resolution or completion of soul contracts. This relationship has fulfilled what it was designed to do. It has given what it designed to give. It has taken what it required. And now it's time to let it go. I think it's probably one of the major 8th house signatures is the releasing, ending, impermanence, death, dissolution of various bonds, obligations, and connections that we have to other people. And that doesn't have to be a bad thing, but it means that bonds and relationships are transforming in a very deep way. The other peripheral topic would be like other people's money, something, or inheritance, and things like that, maybe facing the consequences of old actions somehow. The second house Taurus energy for me, with Jupiter moving into Taurus, suggests a pretty new developmental period, a time of expansion, whether that's around money and business or for the sake of, say, developing skills and new abilities. But building confidence in what you have, building, whether that's developing investments or, again, skills that could be used for the sake of earning income. I find that people with Jupiter entering the second house sometimes go back to school. But whatever it is, it's a development of greater assets and resources that you're coming into contact with, and pretty exciting too, I think, with Jupiter, considering that it's co-present with Uranus. Those are my thoughts on that one for Aries risings out there. What do you think about those?
Well, I think, I agree with this idea in the eighth house, Adam. I would say also with Scorpio being that house, just adding to what you're saying. I think Scorpio, sometimes there can be a sense sometimes of it's really difficult to let go of something I think is really valuable. I need to hold. And I think this might be an exercise with the eclipse, with the eighth house here in Scorpio, of it's safe to release a thing that once brought me value that no longer does. It's safe to let go of this jewel. I don't want to, this is the only image that came to mind, was like the old lady at the end of Titanic drops the diamond into into the ocean. Like it had this idea of like it was super valuable, and it had this thing, and then eventually it's like, well, I don't need this anymore. I don't need to hold this anymore. It's done. And Jupiter moving into the second house, co-present with Uranus. That, I think, I heard Louise Hay once say that, it was always easier to teach a workshop on sexuality than money, because our money beliefs can be so entrenched with protection, and sometimes there's shame, and just very, very, deeply rooted in our psyches. And I'm wondering if, like, Jupiter moving into Taurus, co-present with Uranus, is a way of also beginning to think about or come into a relationship with money in a way you've never considered before, that brings an expansion that, if you hadn't thought of it, would have left everything kind of status quo. But because there's sort of a book you read, or a technique you decide you find, or something that takes you out of your normal grooves with money, there's a way that money all of a sudden begins to sort of have a possibility of expanding more.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those are really nice takes. Yeah, I really appreciate that. It adds some nice dimension to what's going on for Aries folks. Why don't we have you take us in the direction of Taurus rising, with the eclipse in Scorpio in the 7th and Jupiter entering Taurus in the 1st?
So I would say that this is a big emotional culmination point in the way you feel about or in romantic relationships. And the seventh house can mean other kinds of relationships, but I generally find it to mean marriage or long-term partnerships or romantic relationships. And it might be a little bit like we were talking about earlier. It may not be within the structure of the relationship itself in relationship to your partner or the way you perceive partners, but your own sort of internal sense of what you have held as a belief or an emotional structure around relationship that is ready to transform in some way, that under the light, that maybe the eclipse light of this full moon, there's a sense of like a slipstream that's created, where what once felt like a very hard and fast belief gets transformed. But when it's transformed within you, it naturally radiates out into your outer experience. And I feel like this is much more of an internal process in the water sign, and with this eclipse and just the way it's configured, but that it begins to affect relationship a little bit more, which is really interesting, because then Jupiter moves into your first house, which brings such an expansive view on the self. And maybe the way you constellate your own philosophies or your belief structure about who you are. I think that one of the things we often don't realize is how often we call who I am, what we call who I am is often a collection of beliefs that we have that are very, very deeply entrenched. And it might be an opportunity with Jupiter co-present with Uranus here, as Jupiter makes this entrance, a year-long process of Jupiter being in Taurus where you begin to um, come into a sort of emancipation from things you said, well, that's just how I am, or that's just how I am, or what I do, to realize, oh, those are beliefs that I hold and they can change. These are not such solid structures as I may have believed them to be, but there's some sense of them being able to move and change and shift that helps me shift in my identity of who I believe myself to be.
Nice. Yeah, I love that. There's like an opportunity to revise our sense of who we are if you're a Taurus rising, and I am, so I'm thinking about myself, by examining the beliefs that we've held about ourselves. That's a great take on Jupiter entering the first. I really like that. And it's interesting that it would coincide with getting to the bottom of something or
Yeah,
going through the final stages of something around love and relationships too.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
Let's go ahead and move along to Gemini rising. This places the eclipse in the sixth house, and it places the entrance of Jupiter into Taurus in the 12th. Now, these are difficult houses. They are like blind spots to the individual because they're both houses that are said to be in an aversion to the ascendant. So, what that means for ancient astrologers is that this is the stuff that it's almost like there's the unconscious is a little bit more active and powerful in these areas, and there's not as an easy as a time controlling or understanding what's happening in these areas, even though they can be right in front of us. It's, for example, the sixth house can be the conflicts that keep coming up in your life that with the health problems, but you can't get to the bottom of why it's happening, or the conflict just somehow can't be resolved. 12th house, often associated with the things that undermine us, but we can't see them. We don't know where they're coming from. Hidden enemies is another way of putting that. I think with the sixth house eclipse, though, we're reaching the potential for like maybe a place where we can understand some kind of conflict or turmoil or sickness or frustration, because I think the South Node and the Scorpio nature helps us get to the bottom of things, as I've said a few
Mm-hmm.
times. And so I just wonder if this isn't a kind of a moment where it's like something that's been grinding us down for a while is sort of the power has um, the power it has over us is concluding. It's like not going to have
Mm-hmm.
power over us anymore, is what I'm trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, I wouldn't be surprised if, there was some chaos and conflict emotionally. Now, I also wonder if some of that might be related back for Geminis to things around money and resources, given the placement of Mars in the second, just to be a little bit more specific about what kind of conflict, turmoil, and where things are coming to a head. But then Jupiter enters the 12th. And here's what I love about Jupiter entering the 12th as someone who's just gone through it. Jupiter entering the 12th has a way of redeeming and bringing confidence out of insecure places where we've gotten off track, where we've undermined ourselves, where we don't believe in ourselves, where we haven't figured out how to integrate or incorporate parts of ourselves. And Jupiter goes in there and just it shines a light. It's such a redemptive planet to have in the 12th house. But it can also amplify the degree to which those undermining influences are there, and taking us off course somehow. And so it's like Jupiter will amplify the undermining spirits or energies, but it also will help redeem them and somehow bring them to the light. Its natural position is to move into the first house after it finishes in the 12th. So I think for Geminis, it's like on the one hand, you're finishing a season of maybe some really hard, intense emotional work, but then there's also uh, 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 with Jupiter entering the 12th, a season ahead that has to do with starting to redeem some things. It's still going to require work, though.
Mm. Oh, I love that, Adam. I'd never thought of Jupiter in the 12th that way, but that just really like kind of illuminated something I've seen a lot when I've seen this transit. That's beautiful. I mean, I think, it's interesting. I was thinking of this. There's a book I really love by a Vedic astrologer on the lunar nodes, and she describes, if you read the description of the South Node in this book, it sounds a lot like Pluto, right? It has a very Pluto-like feeling to it. It has a lot of the same sort of ways we talk about Pluto in modern astrology, death and rebirth and the release of things and moving things out. And having just had some not only sixth house South Node but also Pluto transits, it does have that quality of, if there's something that feels like that thing that keeps happening, and you can't figure out why it keeps happening, and it maybe affects your physical health in the sixth house, or it affects. I often find the 12th house is a little bit more in the psycho spiritual realm of the mind, but this is a really wonderful opportunity under this eclipse to, if you're willing to see very clearly, and sometimes that can be difficult, something can be revealed under it. The south node can help sort of flush that out, or pull out, whatever feels like the energy structure that's been causing that there, and it can really create a lot of healing. I'm not saying it will necessarily be easy, but I think that the movement of Jupiter quickly after this into the 12th house, that's a planet you want to see coming in after a really, sort of intense inner emotional eclipse like this, that brings that redemptive quality and the clarity quality. So yeah.
Nice. Let's go forward from here to look at Cancer rising. We'll let you lead this one.
So we're going to have for Cancer risings, we're going to have the lunar eclipse in the 5th house. And when this comes to mind for me, I'm thinking about, something coming to the head, or something internally being recognized, or in your emotional space being understood around what actually makes you happy. I think there could be a story here with Cancer rising of like, I've gone along with certain things like, yeah, this makes me happy. Yeah, this makes me happy. But Scorpio has a way of bringing you down into the depths and being like, I hate to quote the Spice Girls here, but tell me what you want, what you really, really want. That sort of feeling to that, does this make me happy? Does this bring me joy? And a little bit with Scorpio too, of like, I don't really care what anybody else thinks. I don't really care if anybody else thinks this is weird or off, or, strange in some way. This is something that really brings me joy and really allows me to find joy. And so maybe even just allowing yourself to go towards those things this month with the 5th house. And then Jupiter moving into your 11th, that's Jupiter's joy. It's a wonderful placement for Jupiter. I could see something like real benefits through your social and professional networks coming to you. Maybe even something that supports. I'm just looking at Jupiter now being Saturn's host in your 9th. I'm just throwing this out of like something that allows you to go back to school in some way for like some sort of more some sort of higher education degree or something like that, or even a reevaluation of how your belief structures and your religious structures, spiritual structures are formulated within your own mind. Some sort of blessings coming through your social professional networks, maybe allowing something like that. I just see Jupiter moving in here, Adam, as a positive sign for Saturn too in Pisces. Just kind of putting that in for
that's not spiritual, religious, community growth and change and development, like a fertile period for new people coming into your life with new kind of reworking of belief structures, integration of beliefs and people in the right mix. I love that for Cancers this month. I think same thing with what you said with respect to the 5th house. Like, what do you really want? What brings pleasure? What brings creative fulfillment? Maybe this is lunar eclipse in that house. You could see things around pregnancy and children coming up, decisions about pregnancy and children, maybe also questions about sexuality. This is the house of Venus, after all, the 5th is, and called the joy of Venus. So, Scorpio eclipse getting down to the bottom of sexual issues, especially where there's like repression or, problems with pleasure or something like that. It's also about, exploration, like getting into darker, more forbidden places around pleasure too, I would say.
Absolutely.
Let's go on to, we'll put, oops, my bad. All right, let's put Leo on the ascendant. So the Scorpio eclipse is happening in the 4th. And again, that is on May 5th. And then on the 16th, Jupiter enters Taurus in the 10th. So, we're looking at an eclipse that's bringing things to a head in the house of home, family, parents, karma related to your living environment or your home. So this is a big change. the eclipses here can bring up some painful old baggage around family stuff, especially the wounds from parents, dysfunctional parents or homes, and the trauma of those environments. And even if it's not, if it's just reliving the past or speaking with a therapist and having a breakthrough, or reliving or having to re-experience something from the ancestral past that's coming up again, you know. But this is an eclipse that is about processing, purging, releasing, purifying family karma, or anything involved with what provides you with a sense of home, safety, and a feeling of emotional security, and what's threatening that, or what's creating it, or how do you establish that? Those are some of the questions behind the eclipse, as far as I can tell. I love Jupiter entering your 10th for Leos in terms of the opportunity for expansion, development, enthusiasm, charisma, breakthroughs, experimentation in career, or what is the life calling all about, and what kinds of possibilities and new opportunities are you thinking about? It's a great year for Leos to have Jupiter and Uranus together in the 10th. I love that for where professional things are going.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that idea with Jupiter and charisma, Adam. That's something I often forget about with Jupiter, but it's true. It just gives that little extra shine, where to bring that out. And man, were you speaking the mantra of, as a Leo rising, the fourth house. And that's what I've been wrangling with, a lot of internal stuff and a lot of, I think one of the things, just speaking from experience with this, and I don't know if the Leos will resonate with it, but I've had to look at my past much more objectively, especially my home life, and come to terms with some pretty difficult truths about some ways that I grew up. But in the process of that, over the last few weeks, what I would offer to Leos is, if you're facing that deeper stuff within, ancestry, home, family of origin, I have felt safer internally than I've ever actually felt in my entire life. And I have felt like, I used to be so scared of relaxing, because when I was relaxed, that's when shit would hit the fan. And now I'm feeling like, man, when I relax, I'm just relaxed. And that it's my nervous system will sometimes bring up old panics that happen around different inconsistencies and abuse that may have happened. But that I allow myself to realize now, actually, no, here I am as a 43-year-old adult. I'm perfectly safe. And I'm allowing myself, I can actually feel my body physically detoxing the stress out. It's very, very Scorpio self-node type feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Any thoughts about Jupiter in the 10th for Leos?
I'm so psyched. I can't wait. I think, Jupiter brings, Jupiter coming into our career house and squaring Pluto on the way in, I think is actually a really positive sign for some real growth, possibly, some financial expansion that comes in as a result of that. It could also be a time where you're maybe configuring your career in the ways that romantic relationships are shifting and changing with Pluto in your 7th. Or maybe even, meeting someone who shares a similar career vision or path as you in a romantic relationship that, brings expansion to both of your careers. I could see all of those happening with that.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Let's move on to Virgo rising. You want to lead us off on this one?
So we've got a lunar eclipse in the 3rd house. I always feel bad for the 3rd house, Adam. I feel like it's like the junk drawer of the houses.
Changes in your mind.
Changes in your mind and your siblings, and everything else we didn't put in the other houses, we'll put here.
It's the junk. It's the junk drawer of the houses.
It's just you're digging through trying to find. But I think the 3rd house eclipse, I could see something here. Now, one thing I've actually been working the idea. You talk about the idea of the environment in the 3rd house is maybe coming to grips with, coming to a culminating point with certain ideas about what you're surrounded with every day that no longer serve you, no longer hold value to you, or maybe your values have changed around them, and there's a desire to kind of put the pedal to the metal now in, if there are shifts that need to be made in your surrounding environment, to start to make them. There's sort of, again, a Scorpio the South Node here. There's that impetus to release the thing that no longer is of value to you, and it could also be something that's just like a mental pattern, something that is going on within your sort of in your cerebral mental sphere, that is like, you know what, this pattern just has run its course. It no longer has value to me. I have to release it out in order to move forward. And then you have Jupiter moving into your ninth house. I mean, a classic signature of that is, you could see someone going back to school, getting a law degree, maybe deciding on a different religious or spiritual path that feels like it brings a more sort of expansiveness to the belief structures that you have. So, I could see someone, Adam, with like Jupiter moving into the ninth house, of being something like, I've decided that in order to move forward in something, I need to have a little bit more gravitas to my credentials. I need to sort of put something in, or have a spiritual practice that really supports the newer belief structures that are coming into place. Those are just some ideas that are percolating around from that one.
Yeah, it reminds me of a time when I look back once at when I had ninth and third house eclipses, because I've had them, obviously, a couple of rounds of them in my life. One period I had, I was kind of opening myself, let's say, to psychedelics and to entheogens and things like that. And as my guiding beliefs were transforming because of contact with those experiences, I realized for a time that I could no longer have televisions in my environment. And so I removed all the TVs from my environment and did so, changed the environment because my spiritual vision for life was changing. To me, that's always been a good example of how transits across the ninth and third can function simultaneously. You got Jupiter entering the ninth with Uranus co-present and a new moon coming through up there and so forth. And the feeling is of expanding and transforming belief systems. They will be directly connected to feeling like something in the environment isn't working any longer. It might be sometimes, like, for example, recently, for my wife's birthday, she's a double Taurus, so early in Taurus season, April 26th is her birthday. So one of the things that I did was I set up a consultant with someone who specializes in helping you kind of reimagine like the paint color for a room in the house. Like it's not like a full designer, but it's basically like, a consultant that'll come over and just sit with you and help you like figure out how you want to transform a room in your house. And that was one of the things I got her for her birthday. And the reason that I did so was because I was having experiences across my ninth and third house transits that were helping me recognize like, oh, I'm a Taurus rising, Venus and Leo, and my wife's always kind of deferred to me for a lot. It's weird because a lot of times I think it's women who make the decisions in the relationship, at least between men and women, about like what the style or paint or what decor is going to be like. Right. She's always sort of deferred to me more in that way. And I just realized it's like one room in our house that I was like, I think it's time for my wife's creativity and her handprint to be like on this room. Like I want to live in her world in this room a little bit more because I'm not sure that I know any longer why I made the choices I did about this room. Seems like a really stupid thing, but it was coinciding with a shift in beliefs and my spiritual paradigm that led me to this simple observation about a room and then the idea for her birthday gift. That's a third house, ninth house kind of thing too.
Totally. Interesting. I like that.
Yeah. Let's move along to, I think we've said a good amount about that. Let's go into Libra rising. This places the eclipse of the Scorpio eclipse in the second house, entrance of Jupiter into the eighth. And this is a powerful place. You're thinking about the culmination of, storylines around money, resources, business, investments, income and expenditures, reaching some kind of moment of catharsis. Might be like that you're coming to the end of a difficult period financially, or a period of feeling like a little drained of your resources, or the need to transform how you're working with them or which resources you have or need. Something is changing around that. And then Jupiter enters the 8th and starts bringing in new possibilities and opportunities that probably come in through other people you're meeting, or through people that you already know that have a new set of resources or ideas or ways of collaborating that might provide some real breakthroughs. Now, often I'm a little skeptical of 8th house transits because it's a little bit like a contract you're signing and you don't always know what you're going to get. But with Jupiter and Uranus there, I feel like, some relationships, some collaborations, some new soul bonds are going to be very liberating for Libras, and what they provide and how they help you create breakthroughs. That's super profound. Also, what do experiences of being drained lead you to need help with? Having to ask for help and receive help from other people could be quite liberating. Since I think Libra, my experience of Libra risings is often that they're quite deferential and it's not always easy to stand up for yourself and say, this is what I want or need. So I think these could be some very positive signs for Librans around these two houses.
Yeah, I agree. And I feel like, with Mars ruling this eclipse from the 10th house too, this feels like a very career money series of transits for Libra risings. And, I could see a scenario from what you're describing too, Adam, like, Jupiter moves into the 8th house and, someone, your spouse or your partner gets a big bump in income, and you maybe have been working really hard to, keep the finances going. You get a little bit of a break from that, the eclipse kind of bringing that to a culmination. And maybe allowing you to also explore some, inklings to make some shifts around career with Mars moving through the 10th house, and quickly into your 11th house after this too for Libra risings, which may take some action through your networks you might feel a little bit more flexible financially to take some action through networks in the coming days in May that you maybe couldn't have taken before the eclipse to kind of freeze you up. That's one way I could see this happening.
Yeah. And also I think I want to just add again, don't be afraid to ask for that help or seek it out actively.
Yeah. Yes. As a Libra moon, I will say that for sure.
Right?
Ask for what you want.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Let's go across the Scorpio. Scorpio risings have the eclipse in their first and Jupiter entering the 7th.
Well, I could see this being a period of, since the beginning of 2022, when we've had the South Node move into the first house, a way you are shifting your identity and releasing old ways you think about yourself, or even things about yourself that have changed the way other people see you. And that this full moon, this eclipse moon being a culmination point in that, especially as it relates to maybe the deeper, more secret recesses of your psyche, as those places are seen and excavated, or maybe even just cared for a little bit more. There's a way that it sort of shifts your relationship to the world, that it's noticeable and people actually relate to you in a slightly different way. And then you have Jupiter moving into the 7th house. Shorthand on that is it's generally a good sign for relationships. It's generally a really nice sign for like cohesion, cohesiveness, order in relationships, especially Jupiter moving into a fixed earth sign. If there's felt like sometimes, when we're in relationship or even wanting a relationship, those deeper inner shifts that you're experiencing in the first house can cause some amount of shifting and changing within the relationship, or maybe a feeling of instability emotionally within the relationship, that as Jupiter enters the 7th house, it feels like it just brings that nice cohesion. Like after all of this change, the relationship acclimates or begins to acclimate towards that new point that the first house has arrived at.
Yeah, I could see it being like, because I've changed, I'm ready to welcome a new relationship in too. Like almost like, sometimes people go through periods of time where it's like, I'm healing from something that happened in the past of a different relationship. And then all of a sudden, a catharsis happens, a little shift emotionally, and then the door just swings open and someone new is entering. I could see that as a real scenario for a lot of Scorpios out there. Also, Scorpio risings. Also, just the idea that meaningful relationships that help you facilitate greater growth and change are entering. And that could be with
Mm-hmm.
Jupiter sometimes in the seventh. I think of meaningful teachers that are entering our life. Now, that could be a lover, but it could also be like a literal teacher. So looking for, you know, it's like a point of emotional breakthrough personally, psychologically, and then followed by meaningful new possibilities in relationships.
Mm. I love that.
All right, let's go on to Sagittarius. So with Sagittarius, we have the eclipse in the 12th, and we have Jupiter entering the 6th. Now, for the eclipse in the 12th house for Sagittarius, this one to me is probably the heaviest placement for the eclipse for all the signs. You're looking at the, real deep, heavy, unconscious material coming up and revisiting it, old stuff resurfacing. You're looking at, the processing of wounds and emotional baggage. And the good news is I think that this could be very healing, but it's not like easy stuff to look at. Scorpio 12th house, South Node eclipse, lunar eclipse. However, right after that kind of deep, cathartic, unconscious space is opened up in the eclipse, Jupiter enters the 6th. And Jupiter in the 6th, along with Uranus, says to me, there is a great work worth undertaking, a great sacrifice, a great effort. And I have hope and excitement about doing the work. For example, if that eclipse brings up stuff in your relationship, which it could, if it does so, I think you're going to find that you have renewed commitment and excitement to either start a new chapter in your life, even if it's a little hard, you have to move out, or if it's about digging in and doing the work with a partner to move forward and have a healthier future together. But that there's an excitement and, again, a charisma with Jupiter in the 6th saying there's a great work, but I'm mission driven. I'm excited. This is going to lead to a breakthrough, that this is good work that I want to do. And it's kind of like when you're excited to clean out your garage or something. It's not fun to clean out your garage or your attic or your basement or whatever it is, but that like this is going to be awesome. I'm going to turn on the music, and I'm going to feel so good when it's all done. And you do when it's all done. So I think there's something about like, okay, this is heavy, but then there's going to be this very inspired sense of like, but I can do it, that comes along with it.
Absolutely. It's funny because my favorite thing in the world is after I clear out a lot of clutter, like when I come home after that and that feeling of, like I could see that being the feeling that comes up eventually for Sagittarius here. It is, when I was looking at this earlier today and kind of checking out where this is all falling for everybody, this really caught my eye because the 6th, the 12th, and the 8th houses are all highlighted because Mars is in your 8th house, moving towards your 9th, but still ruling the eclipse from your 8th. But I think, Adam, just riffing off of what you were saying, when you hit all three of those houses at the same time, it can feel, especially for Sagittarians, and as a Sag sun, I can say we are always looking for the expansive, optimistic hope in everything. It can feel kind of especially contrasted when there's these very deep, especially inner water places that are really triggered all at once. But at the same time, Jupiter moving into the 6th, just to echo what Adam was saying, does give you a can-do kind of attitude with it. Like, okay, here it is. It doesn't look great and it smells bad, but we can do something with it. We can get out, put on our gloves, get out the borax, and we can start scrubbing this out, whatever this is. And I would just say, just quickly on this too, is I think for Sagittarians, the tendency is oftentimes to move with hope and to dream and to see the expansive possibility, which is beautiful. Just being very discerning with this constellation of the eclipse and the movement of Jupiter, of not just relying on hope, but also taking some real, Jupiter moving into Taurus, some real concrete embodied action around what you might notice. Because it's very easy to get caught in that. And I'm speaking fully from experience as a Sagittarius with that. Yeah.
Totally. Let's move into Capricorn next, which constellates the eclipse and Jupiter entrance into Taurus in the 5th and 11th houses.
Well, I would say, the eclipse in the 11th house is interesting. I would say this is a culminating moment for you as a Capricorn rising of what's been going on in the networks around you or the people around you, your allies or your friends. And then, obviously I always build this out into professional networks too, but also just, looking at the people and the structures that support how you're known in the world or support your career in general. Things that may have felt like under the surface need to change for a while under this eclipse are like, you know what, this has to change. It has a more of an imperative behind it. Maybe something there's been a certain group or maybe people within a group that you've been allied with for a while that it's like, you know what, that did serve its function. It was valuable for a time, and now it's time for me to move my allegiances or my focus to other groups that support my career or the way I'm known in the world in this way, in a different way. And then Jupiter moving into the fifth house, we could just say, again, shorthand, there might be things that come up around pregnancy and children for that. Definitely with Jupiter moving into the fifth house, that's a possibility. I think, but Jupiter in the fifth house is like, are you enjoying your life, man? Like, are you just like, are you really allowing yourself, like, what are your beliefs around enjoyment? What are the structures of thought you've created around the ability to creatively enjoy the things that bring you a lot of pleasure? That this is definitely a place where you might be exploring different or innovative beliefs around sex and sexuality, which I could see with Jupiter and Uranus being co-present. But I like this transit for Capricorns. I think this is a nice transit in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I really like that Jupiter co-present with Uranus. I like that there's a that for me that suggests that you're for Capricorns. For Capricorns to have a creative breakthrough, a breakthrough around joy and pleasure and the sense of creative fulfillment, that you're going to create something or that you need to create something that will liberate and break up stuckness in some area. That strikes me as the most promising part of this month for Capricorns. The lunar eclipse says maybe for that to happen, you have to let go of certain people, certain groups, certain social dynamics in your life, or maybe some of them are reaching a place of where you're getting exhausted by them somehow. But there's change around social dynamics, groups, allies, friends, and communities. There's also this invitation to expand and explore creatively.
Absolutely.
All right, let's go on to Aquarius rising. For Aquarius rising, we've got the lunar eclipse in Scorpio happening in the 10th place, which is the place of career, where we have the entrance of Jupiter into Taurus in the 4th place, which is the place of home and family and property. So, I think the lunar eclipse in Scorpio shows up in the 10th house, and for some people is going to mean the end of a job. It's going to be the end of doing a particular type of job or working for a company, or the end of something professionally. For other people, it's going to be the end of a project or the end of a period of working with certain people, or it's going to represent internal changes within a company, or it's going to represent reaching your limit somehow with some aspect of your work. Okay, this particular way in which I work can no longer be. So I think of conclusions, transformation, death, and letting go around the career for Aquarians. Whereas with Jupiter entering the 4th house and now being co-present with Uranus, I love the idea that your base, your home, your foundation is expanding. For example, I could see this easily coinciding with a woman realizing that she's pregnant or about to have a child and about to take a sabbatical or a maternity leave. That's what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
So, the word sabbatical, by the way, although it's used in universities to represent someone taking a year for study or something like that, it actually comes from the word Sabbath, and sabbatical is also another word for taking a deliberate period of rest. But either way, the idea that something is growing and developing and expanding around home and family, around roots and living environment. There's a lot of new possibilities entering there, like the soil is being turned over around home and family. New life is growing in that area. That there's also a letting go happening in terms of your external world and how you appear out in the world or what you do for a living.
Yeah, I love that. I think, one of the things I think is so interesting about Jupiter going into the 4th house here is you know, there's so many times when we're looking at our family of origin, or where we've come from and where we've the ancestral patterns of our family. There can be such a feeling of sometimes it feeling very disparate or very detached in some way, like, well, this thing happened over here with my mom's family, this thing happened here with my dad's family, and they seem like very unrelated events. And one of the things Jupiter does so well is Jupiter takes things that feel unrelated and makes a cohesive narrative out of it. Like, I could see someone who's just like, maybe something that has shifted in the 10th house, and like the culmination of how I'm seen in the world, or what I've brought to my career, or how people notice me, is coinciding with the rediscovery of, or maybe even the creation of, a new philosophy or narrative about what it meant to come from where I came from, what it meant to be there, how I made sense of that, and
Yeah.
brought it all together. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, that leads us into our last sign and set of horoscope for the day, which is Pisces rising. And that takes us into placements across the third and ninth house again. What do you think about these, Alex?
Well, we have the lunar eclipse happening in your ninth house, which is interesting. I feel like this is actually a really nice transit, though might be a little challenging for Pisces, in the sense of clarifying and bringing discernment to your religious or spiritual beliefs. And I think sometimes with Pisces, there can be like everything kind of melds into that, that watery mist for Pisces. And I think that with Scorpio, there's a little bit more clarification in Scorpio, ruled by Mars, and a sense of, I've held a certain doctrine, belief, or philosophy for a long time. And I'm starting to get an itch that, like, that might not be the way I want to go forward. It may not serve me anymore. It may never have served me. And this is a wonderful opportunity to release that. And in some way, that brings a sense of greater order, with Jupiter moving into your third house, a greater order and cohesiveness to the environment around you, where you feel like what's around you makes more sense. There's greater meaning to it, which I think, your rising sign ruled by Jupiter is something very important, I think, to Pisces and Sagittarius, is ruled by Jupiter, is meaning and order, and something that feels like maybe it also grounds you a little bit in Taurus, in this wonderful fixed earth sign. That's something that allows you a more innovative approach to grounding yourself, whether it's in nature, whether it's embodied practices, whether it's even something as simple as, like, I don't know, a cooking class or something, but something that just like gets your hand in the dirt, metaphorically speaking, that comes around from this.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, I like the idea of this being a time of letting go, especially of any kinds of beliefs or ideas that have maybe been acting as a kind of toxin or poison
Yeah.
to the environment that you live in.
Yeah.
And that now it's time to redeem, revive, resuscitate something about the environment, because you're ready to let go of thoughts and ideas that just haven't been creating harmony, haven't been creating flow. That's the very first thing that comes to my mind for Pisces this month. But I really like everything that you said as well. So I'll just add that little thought alongside of it. Well, there we did it. We got through all 12 signs, and I hopefully gave you guys some good things to think about. Anything else you want to add in before we leave today, Alex?
Just, I think right now, I just want to draw attention to the fact that we're in a weird eclipse window, and that this is a very intense, sort of period. But I do think as we get towards, I'm curious your thoughts on this too, Adam. As we get towards the end of May, as Jupiter moves into Taurus, Mars moves into Leo. Mars has had a really awkward 10 months of movement, and I think we'll feel a little bit more, at least more neutral in Leo. That there's a sense of, like, as we get into June, things don't feel quite so inwardly emotionally intense, that there's a progressive lightening that begins to happen over May after the eclipse.
Yeah, agreed. I think that progressive lightening especially goes from Jupiter entering Taurus on the 16th forward. The new moon in Taurus comes through on the 19th. Then Mars gets out of Cancer, like you said. There's a pretty big moment later in May where you've got the T-square between Mars, Pluto, and Jupiter. That's a pretty powerful moment, but it's also it just strikes me as a moment of feeling empowered into action and things like that. So that's a big transit we'll be spending time with on my YouTube channel this month. But aside from that, I feel like the early part of the month is like, it's all about cleaning out some really deep stuff that we've been working on for like a year, very gradually, very slowly, all sort of coming to the surface at once.
Yeah, agreed. And that's
Yeah.
what I would say with that Mars, Pluto, Jupiter. That's the Death Star. Lando
Yeah.
leaving the Death Star.
Yeah. Totally. That's
You know?
that's the moment
Yeah.
of like, all right, let's go. We're out of here.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice. Well, if you want to find Alex's work, I highly recommend you follow him on Instagram, Alex Amorosi Healing. You can also find his work at alexamorosi.com if you want to book a reading with him, do some personal work with him. Thank you so much, Alex, for being here today, for helping us unpack the astrology of the month. Really nice to do so with you as always. Everyone, thank you so much for listening. Don't forget before you leave to like and subscribe. You can find a transcript of today's talk on the website, nightlightastrology.com, where you can also check out our upcoming programs. Any questions about them, email us. info@nightlightastrology.com. All right, that's what we've got for today. I hope you all have a great rest of your week, and we will see you guys again next month. Take it easy. Bye.
Bye, everyone.